This is Radiant Voices Media.
Before we get into today's episode, I want to give a quick content warning. This conversation includes discussion of mental health struggles and mentions of suicide. If these topics are sensitive or triggering for you, please listen with care or come back to this episode when you feel ready. I've also included support resources and helplines in the show notes if you or someone you know needs help or someone to talk to. Thank you.
Hey there, and welcome to the Transparently Jordan podcast, where I'll be talking with a new guest each week, and we'll be covering topics in health, fitness, lifestyle, and so much more. So stick around and let's get into today's episode.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode. Today, I'm sitting down with someone who has turned his past struggles into purpose. Connor has openly shared his journey through mental health challenges, identity, and rebuilding his life and relationships from the darkest moments. Today, I want to explore not just those experiences, but the person behind them, the kid he used to be, the man he's become, and how all of it led him to helping others as a personal trainer and where he is today. So, without further ado, let's get into today's episode. All right, let's talk about supplements that actually earn a spot in my routine. Not hype, just results. I love the Tropica matcha because I love clean energy without the crash. But also, I like how this matcha is smooth, it's not bitter, and I genuinely look forward to having it every day. There's also the pineapple creatine. Creatine isn't just for muscle performance, you guys. There is more research coming out about how it supports mental clarity, mood, etc., etc. If you train, think, move, breathe, you should be taking creatine, in my opinion. So definitely try this pineapple flavored creatine. It tastes amazing. At nighttime, I also love their beauty custard. It legit tastes like dessert and supports recovery while I sleep. It is collagen, so it's great for the skin, the hair, joints, longevity. Both men and women, everybody should be taking collagen. If you want to level up your routine and feel good from the inside out, Tropica delivers. You guys can use my code JORDSDAY10 at checkout to save yourself some money. That's JORDZDAY10 at checkout. JORDSDAY10. Amazing. Well, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it, especially on a weekend, a Saturday. I appreciate people giving giving up their time. Really,
There was a time where Saturdays would have been a no-go. So
yeah. I mean,
God.
it's good, I guess, that we can all take the time to do other things
Yeah.
sometimes. Now, do you mind, Connor, just kind of if the person listening right now had an autobiography in front of them, about you, basically. Could you give us maybe a cliff notes on what we would find in that autobiography?
Oh, that's an
Take your
interesting.
time.
That is an
That's
interesting
why-
thought process.
That's why I love asking this one.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I think it's more a case of what would I want them to know about me. No. I guess to start off with, there's not really much. There wasn't much to know about me. You know, if someone looked at the early starting for me, it was pretty plain and boring, just a everyday kid, I suppose. I had my normal struggles that I suppose kids have in school. I mean, I wasn't popular. I was the bullied, not the bullier, or the bully, I should say. So, and I think that kind of helped me establish throughout life just the kind of person that I wanted to be and who I didn't want to be. But it's not until you sort of get further into my life, it's not until you sort of get into my mid to late teens that things sort of start to get interesting for me, at least.
What was the bullying like for you? Because I think we all live our lives through lived experience, right? We
Yeah.
all kind of shape our personality is shaped by, our past, for example.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to get over that. Sometimes we might have characteristics now that is from, the past. I'm
Mm.
just interested on, if that shaped anything, through late childhood or your teens at all.
You know what? I don't think it did too much because I didn't. There was obviously the hard days, and it's not like I had it worse than somebody else. There. I'm sure there were kids out there that were bullied a lot harder than I. I just wasn't popular, and so as a result of not being popular and in that sort of those formidable years, you sort of if you're not popular, are kind of picked on and what, which is not okay. But and I think that kind of like I said, established who I didn't want to be. But it's interesting when I think about that sort of time period, and then I reflect back into like my later side of life, later teens, I guess early 20s, that kind of stuff. There are people on like social media platforms and that sort of stuff that I've followed or been friends with since those days. Who wouldn't have given me the time of day then, but now like I've had respectable conversations with, never talked about what it was like, but it's kind of interesting how over time things pivot and change. And I guess it comes with the realization of like we're just kids at that time. We're just kids doing kids stuff, discovering who we are, and maybe we don't quite realize who we are at that point. And I mean, it took me, I guess, to my mid to late teens and then into my early 20s to kind of start to really discover who I was as a person. I think it's just an accumulation of happenings over time.
I think that's interesting because, like you were saying, we're all just kids at that age, even through high school,
Mm,
right? Like I think back to I was bullied all throughout high school as well, and I think back to like I have that thought commonly, like I'm not back in Vancouver, Canada, of
yeah,
course, so like I can't really run into somebody that I did from high school.
yeah,
I don't really have a whole lot of relationships, and I'm like, well, if I did, I think perspective is a lot different now. I'm not going to ice somebody out because of something that they've done when we were 14. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Because we were kids back then,
absolutely.
basically. Um, but what did you not want to be? You mentioned that it helped you realize what you didn't want to be. What didn't you want to be?
I guess I didn't want to fit in, which I think for a lot of teenagers and kids, they want to fit in. But I kind of got to a point where I realized like I'm going to fit in where I fit in rather than trying to, meet a certain criteria or demographic. It wasn't until I started um, in like high school where I started to make friends with people that could have been classified as popular, but I didn't do that by being anything other than just myself. And I sort of learnt, and it's still something that I carry with me today, is that someone's going to like me or they're going to hate me regardless. And at the end of the day, personally, I don't care. If somebody likes me, great, then they like me for who I am. If they don't like me, then they also don't like me for who I am. Either way, I'm never going to be anything other than who I am as a person. So it kind of established for me that, you know, I don't need to fit in. I'll forever be who I am as a person. I'll forever be, I guess, my raw and authentic self, and whether that's goofy or serious, or whether it's happy or sad, regardless, any emotion, any characteristic of me is always going to be exactly who I am, and people are either going to love or hate that for who it is in front of them. At
It,
least I'm always telling the truth as
yeah,
well.
yeah. It's like that's a very good. I think of that as a skill, right? I think like personally when I think of not caring what others think, that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with when it comes to realizing that at a young age. I didn't realize that until I was 30 that,
Mm,
I didn't want to live that way. I've always tried to fit in up until this point basically, but I think it takes work and it takes kind of reflection on your past and what shaped your thought processes to make you want to fit in, if you
mm.
know what I mean. Have you carried out your life since that young age that way, basically? Did you struggle at all any times with the fitting in or wanting to fit in through whatever communities that you've been in? Or has it just been something that, you've carried out throughout your life, this
I,
skill?
I think if at any point I sort of decided that I wanted to try and fit in with a certain crowd, I very quickly moved away from that crowd because it was like I had to change who I was to try and be something that I'm not. And as I guess, gravitated through the phases of life, in my teens when I went through my mental health struggles, as I, got into my 20s and started to move around the country and started to take on like my career and all that kind of stuff. The crowds, the people, the groups that I sort of tend to hang around or tended to be around more became filled more and more with people who they just could take me as my raw self. When I started doing youth work in my late teens, when I started working with community groups for mental health organizations, um, again, that was always the opportunity to just be myself and provide a service for a topic that I cared about so much. Um, so yeah, I mean, as I would go through life, and even now, the people that I have in my life are people that can take me for who I am, and I think that's the difference between someone who, again, it doesn't make me better than anybody else, but I think that's the difference between someone who feels like they have to be a certain way to try and fit in with a certain group of people. I mean, I've also been a very alone person for a good part of my life. Like I've thrived on being alone. And when I'm alone, I'm okay. There's been times where I haven't been okay, but that's, different times in life as well. Um, but I've sort of gone, you know what, I'm okay with being alone. I'm okay with being in my own company because, the like I said, people are either going to accept me for who I am or they're not. And either way, I'm still going to have myself. I'm never going to jeopardize my integrity just to try and fit in with a certain crowd or a certain group of people. And at the end of the day, they're just not my people if I have to try and change who I am.
And it sounds like that you've done the work too. Like it sounds like you've put yourself in situations where you found the groups of people, that are, whether it be similar to you or, help understand you or whatever. Like I think too, sometimes I think back to my years, like, the whole wanting to fit in. It's probably because I was in situations or groups that I wasn't meant to fit in,
Yeah.
because, it wasn't me, or I wasn't living authentically to me, basically. And I think back to, or I think to now, basically, being a long distance runner, for example, running is a huge part of my life in triathlon and everything. And a lot of my social group also is in that group. And
Mm.
I just think, like I've put myself in situations now, um, where I have people not necessarily similar to me, but that I guess understand me and take me for who I am. Really, like,
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've really sort of learned, and I've never really put a lot of thought into it because I feel like it's just kind of the waves of life, is that you do generally gravitate towards the people of a similar energy to what you put out. You know, if I think about the friends in my life at the moment, and even like my partner, it's they all came into my life organically from the energy that I was putting out at the time. When I was going through like my really depressive phase in life, um, I don't want to say that the people I attracted were depressed people. We all had our struggles at that age, but I gravitated towards people of a like-minded mentality. Um, when I went down the pathway of like trying drugs and that kind of stuff, I started to gravitate towards more and more people that were doing the same sort of activities. And that's the energy that they were putting out. And so I think the whole identity um, topic that's talked about at the current time, it's like, I feel like finding yourself is a massive part of it. And I guess part of the way that you can find yourself is by who's actually speaking into your life, by who's around you, and then making the educated, informed decision going, this isn't who I want to be, and I've found sort of peace at the present where I go, the people that are in my life, the people that I actively associate with, talk to, even as far as like my clients is concerned as a personal trainer. Like, I had a conversation with one of my friends a couple of weeks ago where I said to him, like, every single person in your life is a choice. Like nobody's forcing them to be here, and nobody's forcing you to be around these people. And I said, for myself, I've got my client base, I've got my friend base, I've got my family, I've got my partner. But at the end of the day, every single person in those groups are there by choice. Yes, obviously we can't choose our family, but we can choose to whether we associate with them. You can choose our partner, we can choose our friends. I'm in a position where I can choose my clientele. And I think it's important to realize that, like, I'll gravitate towards the right type of clientele and the right kind of people by the energy that I'm putting out. And if that person, if that client, that friend, that family member, that partner doesn't meet that sort of energy requirement, well, they're a choice in my life. And I think people get hung up on they have to hang out with certain people, or they have to associate with certain people, or they have to be a certain way to conduct themselves in day-to-day activities. It's all a choice for the most part. Like, I think, at least.
I completely agree. I think too, for example, like when you think of growing up through school, for example, like yes, your friendships are a choice, but also you're forced to be around these people,
Mm,
until you're 12, unless you're bouncing around schools or whatever,
yeah.
right? But I just think to like what you're saying, when you graduate year 12 and you go through uni or go through life basically as a
Mm,
young adult, you have this choice basically. And I think sometimes like it might be the reason why a lot of young adults feel lost at that age,
yep.
because you are given this choice instead of, oh, these are your associates. Now you can like pick your associates basically.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very interesting because I think again, like that might be a reason why people again have this struggle of connection and
Mm,
and really identity at that age in your 19, 20, 21s, because again you have this choice and you don't really know, you're already trying to find yourself at that age, but
yeah.
then you're also trying to find, a social group as well
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because I sometimes think about that, and there's something that's been said to me previously is like I wasn't given a blueprint to this. I wasn't given a blueprint to this adult life, um, and I think that's kind of true. I mean, it would be nice if somebody gave us an instruction manual, but for me, I left school before year 12. I dropped out of school because my mental health was in the toilet, and I said I can't be here. I'm wasting the teacher's time. I'm wasting my time. It's just it's not fit for me right now. I did revisit school about a year later. By then, the whole dynamic had shifted, and again, it wasn't for me. So I had to go down other pathways. So I left school before any of my friends did. I didn't graduate year 12, and I then had to go and find my social circles because my friends that I was in school with, when I was out doing whatever I was doing at that time, they were still in school. And so I didn't necessarily have to go and find social circles, but I had to spend a bit more time on my own. And then when I went to revisit school, my friends that I was previously in school with, they were a grade higher than I was. So I found new friends while still maintaining old friendships. Um, and then I can only sort of use that as an idea based on how I've moved around the country a little bit, and just the friends that I still talk to a little bit from school. Is you leave and then you go into this identity crisis of going, who am I? Because all I've known is my school uniform and my books for the last 13 odd years of my life, and my social circles. And then from school, everyone goes to uni or they go and get jobs, their timelines change. And so trying to make time to still remain friends and stay in those social circles becomes so much harder. Um, so like I said, like I've spent a lot of time on my own, and I think that's where I sort of it also helped develop that mindset of going, if there's people in my life, then they're not only choosing to be here, but I'm also choosing to allow them to be here. But at the same time, they're only here because they accept me for who I am. If they don't accept me for who I am, then that's okay. Like if every single one of them left tomorrow, yeah, it would suck. It would really suck. But I'll be back on my own, and I'll still know who I am. You know, I'll still know what my values are. I'll still know what gets me up in the morning, what puts me to bed at night. You know, I'll still know all of those things.
Mm. That's I love that really because I think to being independent and having, again, I think of it as a skill really. You need to be able to be dependent on yourself first, I think.
Mm,
Like if you're leaning, I think back to, like, I have family members, for example, that have been in relationships since they were high school sweethearts
mm,
basically, and are getting married and have always been, I guess, dependent on other people. And I have conversations with family members all the time about this. Like,
yeah,
I think it's important to really know yourself a little bit more and be able to lean on yourself because, like you were saying, if you don't want people to leave, but if something happens and you are by yourself, you need to be able to independently go through life,
yeah,
really, I
yeah,
think, and not depend on others.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a I guess a very different way of thinking is, in my opinion at least, is that for the first 9 months we were dependent on our mother, and then let's say for argument's sake, the next 18 years we were dependent on our parents or parent in certain circumstances, and then afterwards out of the nest, off you go. Unless, of course, you still live with your parents. And I guess, but even then, sometimes they might detach themselves a little bit. But it's like, off you go. Just know that if you fall, you can pick yourself up, dust yourself off. Like the first 18 years of your life is 18 years of training wheels. And to the point of saying there was no blueprint. Well, actually, the blueprint was laid out for, your years prior, depending on your upbringing, I suppose. Um, so knowing that when life changes, like you're going to be okay because you've already learned the fundamentals, you've already learned the foundations. And this is something that I also talk about with like my clients, and they go, what's the plan? What's the structure? How are we going to do this? Which is very normal for a personal training client to want to know, or an online client to know. They go, what's the plan here? And I say to them, well, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to do like a foundations period where that's where I'm going to learn about you, you're going to learn about me, and we're going to establish your foundations. Then after that, it's not a case of off you go and go have fun with it. No, but then we've learned more about each other, and then they have the tools to then progress forward, just the same as in life. For the first 18 years, we're laying the foundations on this house that is your life. We're laying these foundations. We're establishing your knowledge on how to use these tools, right from wrong, left to right, etc. Then you leave school, your life changes, you go get a job, whatever it might be. You've actually got these tools to succeed already. You just have to know which ones to use and when to rely on those tools to get you through. Like, and I think that was something where I guess I had a pretty good upbringing with my parents, um, and I fell before I left home. I had plenty of falls, got picked up plenty of times, um, but it was not only because I was getting picked up, but because I had the tools there to help me get through whatever it was I was going through, even when I was at my lowest point, even when, and sorry to be dark for a second, even after I attempted suicide and I came to the next day, and then I had to continue on with life from that point, it was because of the things that had been established in me over time and the things that I learned for myself as well, that I knew who I was. I didn't necessarily know what to do next, but I knew that, okay, things were going to be relatively okay. They might not be the same, but they're going to be relatively okay. And I'm now entering a new phase of my life where, Okay, I tried to end my life phase in its entirety. Well, now I've actually got to move on to the next phase of life, which is the recovery phase, which is the going, okay, cool. Not cool, but that wasn't the outcome that was meant or designed for me. So what's next?
Mm. I think that's very interesting. Like the fact that you've mentioned that, you've had an ordinary childhood, you've grown up, good relationship with your parents and whatnot, but you've mentioned that you've gone through mental health struggles, and I think it's a very adult decision to pull yourself out from high school, and realizing that I can't be in this situation. I need to focus on, whatever I need to focus on. At what age did you realize, the challenges that you were going through? And what kind of made you realize that?
So, I mean, I was 16 when my life took a turn, when I started to go downhill with my mental health. So still in school, going through the phases of starting to become independent. Got my learners and was learning how to drive. I had just gotten my motorbike license, which gave me an element of independence before getting my P's on my car. Um, you know, I had those sorts of things going on in my life. My mental health started to go downhill, and I guess like going back to what I was saying about knowing who you want to be and who you don't want to be, I guess it was kind of just a few little pivotal moments where I went, okay, this isn't who I am. And I'm very open to talk about where it came from, and I look at it now at 27 years old, and we're talking 10 years since everything happened, and it was an odd conversation to have not too long ago about this. But I was in a relationship for 3.5 years. She's my first everything. And when that relationship ended, I went through the whole identity crisis because I didn't know who I was outside of that relationship because I'd invested so much of myself into that. Um, and I think it's important to. It can be hard, and again, I don't think that in that particular circumstance I was better than anybody else because everybody's journey is different, right? But in that instance, I knew that something was wrong after the fact. That didn't change the course of time, however. If anything, it probably just added to the journey. I knew that something was wrong, so I asked for help, which I know can be a big thing for a lot of people. I know, and it was a big thing for me. Like it took me a good hour or so of trying to think that something was actually not wrong, that I was actually okay before I asked for that help to go and seek advice from a doctor, you know? Um, and then as you continue down that, I guess that discovery, that identity discovery, I think that's what, for the most part, a lot of what it was is like, I didn't know who I was. So I was going, I don't know who I am. I'm not Connor Tarrant anymore. Like this is not who I am. So, see you bye was, I guess, maybe my mentality at that time. Um, so it taught me to sort of know when things are right and know when things are wrong, which again comes from those foundations of going, when you're in school or as you're growing up, if you're unless you're chucking a sickie because you just don't want to go to school on that particular day. But even then, you know that something's wrong because you potentially don't want to go. You go, I don't know something's wrong. I'm sick, whatever it might be. Then you ask parent for help. So it's kind of an interesting thought process to have of like, knowing when did I know things were wrong and, because a lot of the time I kind of just went with the motions at that point in my life too. I went with the motions that were going on. When I think about the day that, I guess was an enlightening day, but I guess almost the worst day of my life, I was just going with the motions of the day. I didn't think anything was actually wrong at that point. It was kind of a snap decision to act the way that I did. It wasn't until after the fact where I had this moment of reflection where I went, oh, like this is how I was feeling. This is what was wrong leading up to the fact. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I like the reason why I wanted to bring it up and have you talk about some of that and the lived experiences, because I think too, like sometimes when we talk about and people talk about mental health, even maybe the listener right now listening in, like sometimes like when you're in Hollywood watching a movie or something like that, the lead up to an event or the lead up to mental health is always that, something drastic's happened
Yeah.
throughout, your past, or and it's not always like that really,
Yeah.
ordinary people, we all have mental health battles, we all
Mm.
struggle, and I think it's important to really remember that really. Like it doesn't need to be like, a certain instant or something. Like if you need to ask for help, then you need to ask for help, really.
I think like just on that, it's just kind of a thought that occurred to me, and to the person that is listening right now. If I think about what it was like for me in school, and I think about what it was like for, say, my parents when we've had discussions about mental health, is that it's it's sad, but I guess it's almost enlightening in a way. It does bring light to the topic that now is probably the best position the world of mental health has sort of ever been in. Obviously, it's not a great topic, but to ask for help, to get guidance on mental health, to learn more about mental health, there is so much more information and so many more specialists out there now that are educated, that are willing to talk about it. Because when I was in school, this stuff wasn't talked about. If you were either bullied for being sad, you were attention seeking for being depressed, um, you were the whole concept of this was completely lost and foreign. And that's why when I went through my struggles, because nobody, like obviously there were still specialists there, but nobody talked about it. Nobody knew anything about it really. So when I sort of changed my ways and said, this is something that needs to be addressed, this is something that needs to be talked about, and I started doing work towards working with mental health organizations and community groups and that kind of stuff. Like now of all times, I think in this day and age, for the listener that's listening now, if they are going through those struggles, like now is you are in the best position possible to get the help that's needed. And I went a different way. I tried the counseling, I tried the therapy, I tried the antidepressants, but my mindset alone, it's gotten like everybody's on their own journey. And if someone needs to go through counseling and therapy or antidepressants to get themselves to where they want to be or where they need to be, then more power to you. Just my own experience, I tried all of that and it wasn't enough for my brain at that time. It wasn't until I had that rude awakening that there's more for me in this life, because I couldn't take myself out of it, that I went, okay, nobody knows me better than myself. I need to now go find that self, and I now need to do the work to get myself on track. But if someone does need that help, it's the amount of resources that we have now and the amount of development that's gone into building a safe space for this topic is phenomenal, and people don't, unfortunately, when people are in that negative mindset, they don't realize how fortunate they are to have such readily available resources around them now.
All right, I want to talk to you about sunglasses made for runners by runners. That's why I wear Re Your Run sunglasses. Lightweight, zero bounce, and they stay locked in even when you are sweating through speed sessions, long runs, out in the sun, whatever it might be. They are stylish enough for daily wear, durable enough for race day, and just the perfect combo. Honestly, I love brands that get the sport, get the grind, and support the running community, not just the podium finishers. If you're serious about your run gear and want shades that perform as hard as you, go check out Re Your Run. Use my code Jordan10 to save some money and get yourself some stylish sunnies that actually perform and look good. Run smart, stay protected, look good doing it with Re Your Run sunnies. And I loved your point, like, I think we're all unique individuals, right? Like you
Mm.
have to do what works best for you, whether it be, the antidepressants, whether it be counseling. I think I got from that, like, you need to do what works for you. You
Yeah.
did what works for you. And I think everybody's a unique individual, right? And
Mm.
and I loved your point that there's so many resources out there, because there is really, like, I think being in the position that we are, like, whether it be um going to see a counselor or multiple counselors, like, you don't really need to stick with somebody. I think that's also something, 10 years ago, there were so few options out there potentially,
Yeah.
like, and the thought of, like, I've seen psychologists as well. And I think, like, in the beginning, I remember my very first experience, like, thinking that, oh, well, this is it, but, like, not realizing that you can bounce around through, until you find somebody that actually works for you, or something that works
Yeah.
for you, really.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, Now, after, your suicide attempt, what was your experience like, I guess, recovering from that?
So this is, I guess, the thing that a lot of people don't talk about if they attempt, and I hate the word succeed, but it's the only word that I can sort of really use. This is the thing that I feel like nobody really talks about, is the recovery. So I was only allowed out of the hospital because I had a counseling appointment that next day. Like, that was the only reason why I was allowed out of the hospital. Um, when I came to the next morning, there was a security guard posted up outside my stall in the hospital, and that security guard there was for me, because if I tried to leave without my parents coming and getting me discharged, or if I got chaotic, whatever it might have been, I would have been going to the mental health ward. At the moment, I was only on overnight watch. Um, but it's the recovery process, because I feel like people will feel like they have to hide it. Well, no, it's a part of you now. You're still here. That's a part of you. You have to carry that with you. Me personally, again, anything I say is based on my own personal experience, and I think that everyone, if anyone can take anything from what I say, then I really hope it helps. Um, I then had to mend the relationships that I damaged from that, and I even mended the ones that didn't even know that anything had happened. I can vaguely recall the day for the most part. So, um, I had an appointment that was about an hour away from my counseling. So um, I can't remember if my dad was there, but I know mum was there. I got discharged from the hospital, and mum took me to my counseling appointment. I did my counseling appointment, and I guess it's an hour's drive, so rightfully so, we're going to talk, and mum's going to be hesitant about having that conversation, but we had a conversation about it. It wasn't then and there that I necessarily apologized or anything like that, but I tried to reconcile that bridge, that relationship. Um, my best friend, who's been my friend since we were in primary school, had our ups and downs like anybody else. I felt this need that I needed to tell him what I'd done, because I felt guilty. I felt bad that I'd tried to do, and I guess this is a really harsh thing to say, and it's something that it is said, but um, from the outside looking in, from someone that's been there, it's not just from someone that's on the outside looking in and giving their opinion on it. From someone that's now on the outside looking in, but has been there, done that, got the t-shirt, got the scars to prove it. Um, it's so selfish. Like, and I know that's hard, and that's probably hard for someone to hear, but it is, because you know you you don't think about how much of an impact um, your absence can have on somebody's life under those circumstances. And the reason why I say that so, I guess, passionately is because from my perspective now, I think about what the time was like at that age, and the community that I grew up in. We had a lot of youth suicides in such a short space of time, and so there was a lot of people feeling those effects. Well, I myself nearly became one of those statistics, and made my friends and my family go through more than what some of them might have already been going through. I nearly added to their pain and trauma that they could have been feeling. Um, and that's to sort of say that you don't you don't necessarily always have to consider somebody else's emotions, but you're not going. to be around to experience somebody else's emotions. And like, I'm fortunate that I do have a good relationship with my family. I'm fortunate that I've got a friend that's stuck by me all these years, even with moving around the country. Like, he's never left my side. I was literally on the phone to him on the way here. Is that, if I think about what would have happened after that, the emotions, the wave of emotions that they would have gone through, and that's not their fault. That's my fault. I've caused that. What if my absence causes somebody else to then become absent in somebody else's life? It's a weird flow-on effect that a lot of people don't talk about. So on the recovery phase, I then had to try and reconcile with relationships that witnessed it. I had to try and reconcile with relationships that I nearly lost permanently, that didn't have any clue. I then had to try and refigure out, okay, one, do I want to be back in that place? The answer to that was no, because that was scary. I then had to try and figure out, what I was going to do next. How was I going to live on with the life that I've been given? And I think that's the hardest part. And that goes back to what we're saying about identity. Is I then had this new identity that I've now got to live with this trauma that I've created for myself, and try and continue on with the parts of my life. And so that's why I can talk about it now. And there's still emotion attached to it, of course, but I can talk about it now because I don't want anyone to be in that position again. Like, I don't want, if one of my friends, or even, and it's always sad when you hear about someone passing. I mean, it doesn't matter how they pass, it's always sad. But, if I hear of somebody that's passed due to their own actions, I kind of feel a little bit more for that situation, because it's like, I've been in that position, and, they must have really, really been in a rough spot to be so inclined, and it's such a hard thing. And I don't want to see anybody in that position again. I mean, that's why I do what I do. That's why I became a personal trainer. My business is named Empower Health and Fitness. And a lot of the clientele that I attract are people that are dealing with mental health struggles. Now, I'm no therapist, but gym is oddly a form of therapy, and so for me, it's about, if I can help someone, just one person, or 80 people, or however many people it might be, if I can help someone just get through the next day, or get through their their day-to-day bits and pieces. If someone coming into the gym, or someone getting their check-in video from me, is enough to make an impact on that person's life, to make them have a better day, then that's all I can ask for, And the gym's what saved my life. Gym and music, that saved my life.
And you were mentioning that, you've worked with mental health organizations, and it sounds like you've tried to help people in other areas as well. Was that also a form of therapy for you?
Yeah, I think it's I I think it was a form of therapy, but I guess it was trying to do something to make me feel good about myself. That maybe I did have a purpose. That maybe I was cut out for something more out of life, something more fulfilling, something more rewarding. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it definitely was all part of it.
Mm, yeah. When you, I guess, discovered personal training, that side of things, as
Mm.
well as music, how did that come to be for
So
you?
I grew up a musician. I grew up playing music, playing guitar in musicals. I did music class in school, so it was always a part of my life. Didn't matter what type of music it was, but it was always part of my life, and so music has always been a form of, I guess, therapy for me. And because lyrics in themselves can just speak so uh, passionately towards a person, and they can convey messages and information that you otherwise can't get out in a very poetic format. Gym, however, that was for me, it was a place to let out that emotion, and I've been with people that have cried in the gym when they've just done something. And, I sort of will commend that. I'll congratulate them on that, because that's such a heavy emotion that's just come out from this platform. that probably had to come out. You wouldn't really want to be sitting at home letting that emotion out necessarily, but you've just done something that's maybe you've pushed yourself really hard on a heavy exercise, or you've accomplished something that you didn't think you could accomplish, and now that emotion's now sort of pouring out of you. Um, for me, like the gym was something for me to let out that emotion, whether it be anger or anxiety, or whether it just be just general sadness and emotion, or to let out some happiness as well. Go, I feel really good today. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to have a great session. That's still a mindset that I have today. Because that was also part of that day as well. Like after everything had been said and done, the next place I went was the gym.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah. I think we were talking about this on air. Like I find the gym and I find, fitness quite interesting because everybody is in the gym with a different story.
mm,
Basically, everybody has a different story. Everybody's there for a different reason.
mm,
And I think, fitness and exercise is such a powerful tool, both physically and mentally, really. And it's just interesting to me that again, like a lot of people, yeah, might go there for the physical aspects,
mm.
but you also don't know, like, unless you sit down and talk with somebody, a lot of people go
Yeah,
there for the therapy side of
yeah.
things.
I have a regular conversation with a lot of my clients and a lot of my new clients as well, that are feeling a bit anxious in the gym, or they might look at a certain person in the gym and maybe feel less than what they are because of how a person looks and how they've built and developed themselves. And I always say, remember these things. Remember, they started here one day just like you did. One day, no matter whether they were athletic in school or whether they've come from being overweight, underweight, whatever it might be, at one point in their life, they started here just the same as you. So they actively decided to make a change in their life to pursue something else, to pursue something more, or maybe to progress something more in their life, but they still had to start and still not know anything. So if you feel awkward, if you feel anxious, if you feel uncomfortable in the gym because you don't know what you're doing, well, one, that's where I guess people like myself come into play. That's part of our job. But at the same time, everyone in that place has come from a different background, come from a different story. Um, and so when you are in that gym, yep, I know a couple of my guys, feel uncomfortable because they feel like somebody might be staring at them and maybe judging them. I know that a few of my guys feel uncomfortable because they feel inadequate because they don't appear the same as other people in the gym. And it's like, that's okay because you're on your own journey and that's something special within itself. You're on your own pathway to success. What your goals might align with somebody else's, but those two people are on two completely different journeys and pathways through life and have two completely different obstacles to overcome in front of them. So remember that every single person in that gym had to start somewhere, and everybody started not knowing anything. Everyone started as a child in the gym, in my opinion. Um, and that was sort of my mentality is I didn't know what I know now. I had to start. I had to deal with the anxieties and the stresses and all that kind of stuff. And so, I feel like in the fitness world, that's something that a lot of people don't talk about because I think a lot of coaches personally, I think they get caught up in where they are now versus where they came from. Um, and it's that conveying of information that I myself, as a personal trainer, had to start somewhere. I had to start not knowing anything. And before I became a personal trainer, I still didn't know. I had to then go and learn how to be a personal trainer and learn how to actually exercise and all those different bits and pieces. So again, the gym was an outlet for me to get those anxieties out and to rediscover and discover who I am as a person, you know. That's where the music also came in as well because I always had my headphones in.
Yeah, yeah. And I think like I love that what you just mentioned because even like if we're en route for like sticking on topic of the personal trainer, for example, like I can guarantee you could be a personal trainer that's been training for 30 years and there's still things that you don't know.
Mm,
Like I think we're always learning, we're always evolving. And, for that anxious person in the gym, if you are one of them listening right now, like again, I think everybody's in there for a different reason. And that was something that I struggled with. I think gym anxiety is a real thing, really,
100%.
especially if you're going to a new gym. I've been training since I was 18. I'm 30 now, so like that's a whole lot of time, but I still get quite anxious if I go to a new space or a new gym or whatever. But like I think too, it's very rare that somebody's going to be looking at you or comparing themselves or whatever these anxious feelings that we have
Yeah.
are. I think like our mind is such a powerful thing, and that's important to realize really that
Yeah.
we're our own worst enemies sometimes, and that's again a skill that we need to work on,
Mm,
but again, like our mind is such a powerful thing.
absolutely.
What motivates you?
So that's a very interesting, I guess, question for me, is because I thrived off of motivation for a long time. It's now that I have to thrive more on disciplines than motivation. And even then the the disciplines fall, and then that's where motivation picks up the slack. So it's kind of a different um way to what I guess a lot of people are aware of, is they think, oh, I'm not motivated to do certain things. Well, motivation will only get you so far, because motivation runs out very quickly, especially if you're not necessarily getting the results that you want to achieve, whether it be in business, in the gym, in life, whatever it might be. Motivation will only get you so far. Disciplines are what's going to keep you on track when motivation runs out. Then it's the motivation that's going to top that back up. So it kind of, a lot of people will start in the gym being motivated. And I relate a lot to the gym because obviously that's my profession. And that's where I spend a good majority of my time. So apologies if I keep repeating stuff about the gym, but it's, you see people start in the gym and they're so motivated to achieve their goals, but then their motivation runs out because they haven't achieved them in the time that they expected, or because the journey to get from point A to point B actually encountered A point one and A point two, and then eventually you get on to point B. You know, you encounter these little obstacles along the way. Um, and so for me, it's like what motivates me. Um, I think it's, again, it's a bit hard for me to answer that these days because, I my motivation has not only shifted from what I want to accomplish fitness wise, but it's also shifted into what I want to accomplish business wise as well. Being my own boss, being self employed, you've got to be motivated for that. And when business starts to slow down a little bit, you have to rely on those disciplines to get you through to the next top up of motivation, whether it be, you sign a new client or something pivots, something shifts for the better. At the moment, I guess my motivation shifted a little bit because I've just undertaken a new business adventure. And so I'm really, really motivated to get the most out of this. But if it starts to slow down, I've then got to rely on those disciplines to actually try and answer your question as to what motivates me, other than just, relying heavily on disciplines. Um, I think it's just, what motivates me is to just be better than I was. I don't have, I did have idols. I did have, you know, goals that motivated me. And I guess sometimes they do keep me motivated. But now it really is the concept of just being better than I was, being 1% better than I was yesterday, being 1% better than I was last time I did something of a similar nature, being that little bit better every single time, because then it's not a case of over 100 days you're then 100% there. That's not the case at all. But it's, just every set, every rep, every action, every little thing that you do, it's just being that little bit better at it. And then from that, you can then take that information that you've acquired and you can take that into the next experience to then make that a little bit better. And then again and again and again.
I think that's an amazing answer, really, because like that's like one of the reasons why I ask that question to almost every guest that comes on, really, is because I think we all have our own answer to what motivates us, but it's also something that I get asked all the time. Like if I, let's say, think to the social groups that I am that, don't run marathons or don't, train for half Ironmans or whatever it might be, that's a question that I get. What keeps you motivated? How do you wake up at 4 o'clock? How do you train after work? How do you, and I think like it's important for the listener listening to realize that motivation isn't, like you were saying, the only thing. Like for me, I think ugh, more than 50% of it is habit. Like if I did not have the habits that I have, like I would probably have quit.
Mm.
Like I just raced a 70.3 half Ironman in Melbourne last Sunday, and I could tell you for certain, like the last maybe month, 2 months leading up to it, it was so busy, so intense. Like if I didn't have the habits, I probably would have just backed out, really.
Absolutely. And obviously there's good and bad habits, but it's the good habits that you could also classify them as disciplines. It's those habits, those disciplines that you employ in those moments that carry you through to said finish line. Myself being employed by somebody else while still trying to grow my own business to now be fully self-employed. um, you might think, well, some people might think that money's the motivator. How do you stay motivated, or what's your motivation? Well, bringing on new clients and making more money. No, because at the end of the day, like, clients leave, money changes. You can't take that stuff with you when you die. You know, money can be a great motivator, but what happens when that runs out? What happens when that gets low? Well, it's the disciplines that you've learned along the way to get you to where you want to be. So for me, there's someone that's trying to not grow my business for financial gain, but to grow my business to go back to what I said before, to just try and help as many people as I possibly can, and trying to help them with something that I'm so passionate about. How how do you get through when okay, the clientele aren't coming in, or when somebody leaves? It goes, well, it's the disciplines. I still need to be who I am as a person, because that's what attracted somebody to me in the first place. I still need to show up, and I guess in the fitness industry, the concept is that you have to be athletic, or at least appear as though you're athletic, or you work out, or show that you know what you're talking about, and those kinds of things. Um, it's still a common misconception, but that's what a lot of people gravitate to. Um, so I still have to, when motivation's getting low because someone's dropped off or whatever it might be, it's go, okay, cool. I still need to show up in the gym. I still need to film this piece of content. I still need to do these things and these things. I still need to do my programs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so for me, it's like money's not the motivator. Bringing on a new client and having an impact on somebody else's life, that's a motivator. Having someone, I've been so fortunate in the last 12 months to work with such an amazing bunch of people. And I hope that every single one of these guys hear this podcast and acknowledge how much they actually mean to me as a person, because they really, really do. But when I get up at 5:30 in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I have to be at the gym at 6 o'clock, I can be dead to the world. And my 6 o'clock clients know this. I can be absolutely dead to the world. But when I walk through that door and I see them there, my day is instantly better. And it's greater than any caffeine hit. It's something, it's like a high that can't be explained. And I guess that's the motivator. I look at it and go, I'm going to be here from 6 a.m. till 7:45 tonight, or 8:30 tonight, whatever it might be. And that's the motivator, is like, I get to help, 5 people this day, 7 people that day. I get to be on those things. So, but again, that only goes so far. It's still the disciplines that have to carry you through the day-to-day runnings.
Yeah. And I think too, like it's about having those multiple goals in a
Mm.
sense, right? Like if you go back to your example of, you're not going to have money forever, really, or when your diet's gone, basically, or where is it going to go? Like, I think too, like if that's the only goal, if you just have one goal and you reach that goal, well, then what then? And I think that's an identity crisis for a lot of people as well. When they reach a goal or a certain goal, they're like, oh, okay, well, now what? I've reached that high. I have felt that
Mm.
high, but now I'm like crashing and burning because I'm at an all-time
Yeah.
low.
Yeah. I'll relate to that in the sense of, so I've done 2 bodybuilding competitions over the last few years, with more to come. My very first one, I didn't believe it when I was told that I'd feel empty, that I'd feel without a purpose afterwards. I thought, nah, it's fine. Like, I'll just go to the gym, I'll carry on my life. You spend 16 weeks dieting, losing yourself, losing your mind to the repetitions of training and cardio and eating and staying on top of your diet, and that becomes your whole identity, all to get to one day to stand on a stage, tanned and underwear on, and then that day is finished. Whether you've got and we'll say the season, because you can obviously progress from there as well and go on to nationals and that kind of stuff. But your season's finished, and you go, what do I do now? Because this is all I've known for the last 16 weeks. I can't just prep for another one. I just can't go and step on stage again tomorrow. So then you have to start prepping for your off season, and that seems so much harder because you've actually achieved the big goal. Now you've actually got to repeat all the same actions, just in a different format, to then reach the next goal, which might be stepping on stage again. So you go through this identity crisis, and you don't know who you are, what to do, where you're going, because you've worked so hard to achieve said goal. And this is what I say to my clients when they're so hell-bent on one specific goal. And I say, that's great. I'm glad you have that big goal. Keep that in mind. It's good. Let's accomplish some small goals along the way. And they some of them will go, okay, yep, no worries, I can see the point. Others, however, just have this big goal in front of them, and that's all they want to accomplish. And that's great. That's a good motivator. It is a good motivator. But here's the thing, is that on your way to accomplishing said big goal, you're going to accomplish micro goals along the way. You're going to accomplish little things along the way, little things that are going to make you that little bit better. By the time you reach that big goal, you've actually already hit it. You've surpassed it, and you're working on to the next ones. I'll use this as an example, because I feel like it's a very common goal for some females in the gym, is they want to grow their butt. They want to grow their glutes, okay? Now, muscles take time to grow over time. Muscles take time to develop. They take a long time because they're hard to grow. Glutes can be pretty hard to grow as well. Along your journey to growing said glutes, okay, that's going to grow incrementally. You're looking at yourself every single day, so you're not going to notice the little changes. Someone that sees you once a week or once a fortnight or every couple of days, they're going to notice the differences more than you are. So you're probably going to be more critical on the fact that you haven't achieved your goals. Well, in actuality, you're well on your way to achieving said goal. You've accomplished micro goals along the way. You've increased your intensity, your weight's gone up, you've learned new exercises, you've progressed, you've developed. Other areas of your body has changed as well. Other physiological things have happened along that way as well. And then by the time you get the ideal glute that you want, you're actually already progressing on to the next thing. You just haven't realized it because you're looking at yourself every single day and you're being so critical of yourself every single day. So it's important to think about the big goal. For me, like, I want to step back on the bodybuilding stage next year, at the end of next year. That's the big goal for me. But along the way, I'm going to accomplish a lot of little micro goals on that journey as well. I'm going to do a successful off season, which for my line of work is a big thing, to do a successful off season. Then we've got to do a successful bodybuilding preparation. Then we've got to put on more size. We've got to develop more muscle groups, all these little things, all these little micro goals, these micro transactions along the way to the big spend, which I feel like a lot of people don't give themselves enough credit for, because we are so critical of ourselves.
And I think like the reason why I wanted to bring that up and this topic up is, this is something that I'm going through right now. For example, like just having done the half Ironman on Sunday,
Well done.
like it post-event crash or like post-goal crash. This is like a topic that's, I think, going to go live before this episode, but it's a real thing. And I think like something that I've realized this past goal, like, you spend 14 weeks doing 3 sessions a day, like 16 weeks an hour. That's your identity basically. Like, and I think it's made me realize the last few days, especially getting home from Melbourne, sitting on my sofa and being like, this is a bit depressing now. Like I've
Yeah.
gone from 100, like 1,000% to like nothing really. And I think like, I think back to prep, and I think back to like the last 14 weeks, I think too, I probably have let other things drop. I think if you still have other micro goals like you're talking about, or, I think a lot of the times too, like I've let, I haven't focused on the podcast as much, or like, I prioritized so much on this one goal that I think when it's done, you don't really have anything else really.
Yeah.
So I think like importance of not dropping everything and putting all your cards in one basket is super important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for some people they have that one and only big goal that they want to accomplish. I myself outside of bodybuilding do have those big goals that I want to accomplish. I have those big goals that I want to accomplish from a business standpoint. From a clientele standpoint, the where I want to guide, I guess, my business towards going, but have to give yourself credit along the way on the things that you did and even on the stuff that you don't even recognize. And I'm my own worst enemy. Like when my partner hears this, she's almost going to call me a hypocrite, I'm sure, because I'm my own worst enemy
We
when it comes
always
to stuff.
are, yeah.
I think about um, okay, in this line of work, you kind of have to you do have to not only invest in yourself physically, but you do have to invest in yourself mentally, and you do have to invest in yourself financially as well. And I think financially is the big thing. And for me, looking at it from a business perspective, like I said, it's not about the money, but to achieve what I want to achieve, which is help more people, I have to then spend money to then bring on more people, to try and bring in more audiences and get more people looking at my stuff and going, what, I want to work with this guy because I think he can help me get to where I want to get to. I don't give myself enough credit on the things that I see as negative. I see, okay, like my business coach, he's cost an arm and a leg some weeks, but I should give myself more credit the fact that I'm doing that. I'm doing that because it's going to help propel me further into what I want to accomplish with my clients, where I want to go with my business, So I should give myself credit. It seems negative some weeks. It seems negative because it's hard, or might make the bills a bit hard, or whatever it might be. But that's actually beneficial in the long run for the people that got me there. And I'm so blessed. I'm so thankful that I get to work with the people that I get to work with. I'm so blessed and thankful that I get to do what I love to do every single day of my life. And I know a lot of people don't get that opportunity. I didn't get handed that. I had to work for that. I had to earn that. And that's why I'm so thankful and blessed that I get to do this, and I get the platform that I do to talk with people. And then, I get to come and do things like this. It's because of that accumulation of those small little goals that I didn't give myself credit for, that now looking back and looking forward, I can give myself a little bit of credit for what I did at this point. I can look back and, what this show is all about. I can look back at all the things that I did from a kid to being a teenager, the pathways that I took there, the things that brought me up to make me who I am today, to where I want to go and what I want to do health and fitness wise, and how I want to help other people health and fitness wise. If all those little things that might at the time have seemed negative, if I don't give myself credit for them now, well, then you and I probably wouldn't be having this conversation, which is a great conversation to have, a great platform to be able to talk about these things.
Yeah. And I think like my final question for you, and I don't want to ask this to stay in the negative space or whatever, but
Go for it.
I think like I find people's answers to this question quite interesting, and it's, what scares you? Is there anything that scares you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's a topic that I talk about more often than I care to admit. Failing, and it's a real thing, fear of failure. Aside from things like snakes and spiders, I still get the spiders around the house. Don't worry, I still perform those duties. But it's failing, and it's failing myself. But that's, for me, that's not the big failure. The big failures, or the things that scare me the most, is failing my family, failing my friends, failing my clients, failing my partner. All of these things in no particular order come before myself, which I tie into every single one of them. If I fail my family, my friends, my clients, my partner, I in turn am then failing myself. And that's the biggest thing for me is feeling or experiencing failure outside of failing in the gym. And that's, you know, that's something that a lot of my clients are afraid of, is failing in the gym. They're scared of failing a weight, and that's embarrassing. That's scary. They don't want to do that. And it's like that. If ever there's a good place to fail, here's a good one to fail, because this is going to teach you that it's okay to fail. But that's what scares me, is failing, is not performing for all of these different groups of people that at the end of the day mean the world to me. You know, my partner means the world to me, my family mean the world to me, my friends and my clients, because going back to what I was saying before, not only do I choose them, they choose me. They choose me. And so if I fail them, if I let them down, well, they made that choice and I've let them down, you know? So that's where that comes from. You know, if all of this went away tomorrow, if it was my fault, that's a reality I couldn't live with. I would live with it, but I couldn't live with that.
How do you not dwell or not get lost in that fear of failure?
Knowing that things are going to go up and down. Life is going to go up and down, you know, whether it be happiness, sadness, whether it be finances, whatever it might be. Things are going to go up and down. And the ups don't necessarily mean success, and the downs don't necessarily mean you failed. I think it's just taking it one step at a time, one day, one action, one motion at a time. And you don't have to necessarily take a step to evaluate, go, oh, yeah, I succeeded at that. I did that. It'll just happen naturally, you know. I take being able to sit here across from you and have this conversation as, you know, that's a success. You know, it's not a failure, it's a success. It's a success that I didn't think that I would have. It's a success that I didn't even think was in the realm of possibility, but it's a success nonetheless. And so you just take it one step at a time. And when the good comes, ride the good. When the bad comes, ride the bad, because both of them will come to an end eventually. The good will get met with bad, and bad will get met with good. And that's something that I'm experiencing now in my life is, you know, it's one sort of, it seems to be a collection of just sort of one bad thing after another, you know, one thing that didn't quite go to plan, one thing that didn't quite go my way, those things. And it kind of just builds and builds and builds on time. And, you know, it's a thought process I was having the other day, because I was so stressed with a few things, and then something started to go wrong. There's one more thing going wrong, you know, and, you know, most people might take that as a failure because they can't maintain certain aspects of their life or whatever it might be. But it's like these moments pass, you know, it sort of relates. I guess I adopt that mentality a little bit from a video I was watching about Tom Hanks. And if he could write a letter to his younger self, what would he tell himself? And it's like, this too shall pass. You know, the good times, this too shall pass. The bad times, this too shall pass. What is so bad or so good happening in your life right now, this too shall pass, but so will what happens next. You know, so I think that's what keeps me moving forward, is knowing that these moments, this will pass. And then it's what I do next that's going to determine, I guess, how long the next phase lasts. If it's bad, how long is that bad phase going to last? If it's good, how long is that good phase going to last? You look at the most wealthy people in the world. They don't live a good life 100% of the time. They have the good days, they have their bad days, and they're human just like the rest of us. So those too shall pass.
Where can people find you? Plug whatever you want in. Where can people find you and reach out if they need?
Yeah, so they can find me on my Instagram, which is Connor Tarrant _health coach. For if there's a listener out there that wants to work with me from a coaching perspective, there is a type form there. So please jump on and fill that out, and we'll get in touch and have a chat, or DM me personally. That too also works. Yeah, that's sort of where I'm most readily available is on social media, and I try to post content that people can relate to, not just in the gym working out or eat this to achieve this. I try to do quite a few raw talks as well. So yeah, Connor Tarrant _ health coach. That's where you can find me.
Perfect. And that'll be in the show notes. So if you listening want to go and support Connor, definitely go and scroll through the show notes and you'll find that there. But thank you so much for taking the time. I think this was very insightful, and I do think that the person listening will get a lot from this. So thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for having me. And to anyone that does listen to this, just remember that this too shall pass, and that everything's going to be okay. Just take it one step, one rep at a time.
All right. I want to thank Connor again for coming on today's episode. And for you listening, thank you for tuning in, spending your time with us today. And if you can, and you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast, scroll down, hit that 5-star review button. It really helps out the show and it shows your support. I, again, thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you in the next episode.